All right, now to the presidential race. Frontrunners Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are looking ahead after big wins last night. Hillary Clinton widened her already massive lead over Bernie Sanders. She now has nearly 2/3 of the delegates she needs to secure the nomination.
As for the Republicans, Donald Trump added Florida, North Carolina, and Illinois to his winners column. But he was defeated in Ohio by popular Governor John Kasich, who earned his first win of the election season.
We're joined again by CBSN political contributor Leslie Sanchez. We're never letting you go. Mike Huckabee's former communications director Hogan Gidley is here with us, and USA Today's senior political reporter Heidi Przbyla is in Washington, D.C. All right, first to you, Heidi. Can anything stop Trump at this point? Is his nomination inevitable?
I'm not going to go there on inevitable, but I'm sitting here literally trying to game out how does this work for a Kasich or a Cruz, and I just keep coming back to the same conclusion, which is as long as this is a three-man race, which Kasich said last night, I'm going all the way to the convention, I don't see how it's anyone other than Trump or a contested convention. Kasich, even if he would have to win more than 100% of the delegates, that means there's not enough delegates left for Kasich to actually get over the line. Cruz would still have a pretty heavy lift, something like 72%. And I don't see how he consolidates the anti-Trump vote when you've got Kasich, who's going to be making a really powerful argument potentially in some of these other Midwestern states that are yet to come up on the calendar. And if you look at the demographic split last night, there's no indication that Cruz is expanding his base of support. Donald Trump still won with all of the most important groups, evangelicals, non-evangelicals. He won working class votes, but also in the wealthy suburbs of Chicago and in Florida and Palm Beach. So give me a scenario where he's stopped at this point. It's really hard to kind of sketch that out.
So the numbers really don't seem to be adding up, Hogan, for Kasich at least. I mean, it almost seems like you're almost trying to win the Powerball or something in some respects. So if
you have a better chance at winning the
Powerball. I think you do.
Or maybe the plan is that he's a power broker at the convention. He's not necessarily even looking to garner the nomination, but he's there to bring together.
Maybe, but you have to have power to be able to broker power. And he doesn't have any. He's only won one state. It's his home state, a state where he's around 80% popularity amongst Republicans, excuse me, around 60% of popularity amongst the rest of the electorate. And it still took a while to call Ohio. He had to fight and scratch and claw and release some of his turnout apparatuses and spend some money in the state to actually, where he's the sitting governor, to actually win. And we were laughing last night. He had behind his head that as Ohio goes, so goes the nation. The problem with that is Ohio went for him, but all the other states have gone for somebody else. He hadn't won a state until now. So it's going to be very difficult for Kasich to garner any support, have any power going into the convention. And don't forget, one of the rules there that we've talked about extensively, and it's kind of wonkish, so I hate to go that route, but you have to get more than 50% of delegates in 8 states to even be on, have your name submitted for the nomination. And what that means is he ain't getting his name on there. And it's not just for the first ballot. That's for second, third, for every ballot. He cannot be on his name cannot be on that list at all. And it's kind of sweet irony because the establishment put that rule in place. It's affectionately called the Ron Paul rule to try and keep the Ron Paul folks from taking over the convention in 2012. And that very rule to protect the establishment candidate in 2012 may effectively keep the establishment candidate from having any power. But can they change the rule?
Can they change the rule?
They can change it. They can change it, but there would be hell to pay unless there was some kind of a seismic change in Donald Trump's support. Let's imagine you go in there and he's still got a plurality or more of the vote. I think there would be a huge backlash among the Republican base of these working class voters against that. So I think something dramatic would have to happen to Donald Trump between here and there. And I don't think, I challenge you all to come up with what that might be, considering what we've already seen in this campaign.
The funny thing, the interesting and peculiar thing about all of that is you think about who these delegates are. Right, so we're talking about delegates that actually commit, and now they're going through the process where delegates are actually committing to a certain candidate. But most of the party faithful are still kind of in that establishment aisle, have gone to conventions year after year. They know the party bosses. They know what kind of happens in those things. So what happens if you're a newbie to this process? It really becomes a lot of political chess.
Right, but where do they change the rule? at convention.
Yes.
So you've already got somebody with a majority of votes coming to convention, and now you're going to try to take it. This is where this becomes a big problem, right? And look, if you think people are angry now,
that would be a big.
Wait until that happens. There's going to be a political jihad on the right like you have never seen.
And it's interesting. I haven't heard that before. Political jihad. It's interesting though. If you also look at John Kasich's win in Ohio, some of the counties that he didn't win, that Donald Trump did much better than him in, are some of those states that Donald Trump has already won, close to those states that Donald Trump has already won, which says, as you pointed out, that his win in Ohio, it's a win, but it came. You know, he was eking it out.
Came at a price, and it's up and down where you've got manufacturers, you've got the coal industry's up and down that, and he's winning with that type of blue collar worker. That's a good sign for Donald Trump.
But what's his thinking? Get in his mind, Leslie, as a strategist. What is he thinking? I mean,
I don't think anybody
that's a scary
thought. That's a nightmare.
I think a lot of people are wondering. He was saying all along, up until last night, that he was going to win Ohio, and that was going to be his path to the nomination, and he was going to stay in the race. If we're all talking about this, and the math is not in his favor, what are his campaign strategists saying to him, and what are they trying to accomplish here?
Right. Now, if you think about his campaign strategists, were former John McCain's campaign strategists, John Weaver, and such very astute strategists in terms of understanding the dynamics of New Hampshire, understanding how to keep the candidates viable, understanding how to. He's basically the one, very much like John McCain, and we've talked about others, that are the last man standing to some extent. That is not by coincidence. That is really by allowing others to kind of shoot at each other or take the incoming from Donald Trump. So there's much bigger thinking about this. It's not necessarily, I think we're talking about the wrong aspect of this. It's not just running the table, so to speak, and Donald Trump's getting the nominee. It's slowing that momentum down so that you can look at alternatives for the anti-Trump movement. Right. That's why you saw so many individuals who weren't necessarily fans of Senator Cruz go ahead and bundle their money and their dollars, take all their toys, so to speak, and go into that sandbox because they realized he is the most viable to slow the momentum of Trump. And that creates opportunity for a bigger conversation. I'm not saying anybody's going to like it, but I'm saying when you talk about individuals who are very concerned about the effect of Donald Trump on the Republican Party and if he is a Republican and people debate back and forth, this is the strategy they have right now.
Right, and it's very cumbersome what they're trying to do here, right? It's not a vote, let's coalesce behind one person. It's let's coalesce against somebody.
Right.
That's very cumbersome, and you saw some of that with Mitt Romney when they asked who would you support, and he said, look, I would be with Kasich in Ohio, and I would be with Rubio in Florida, and Cruz in some other states. He couldn't even answer it, and I would say this to the big Romney speech. If you really wanted to effectuate change in this, you could have done one of two things. You could have endorsed putting all your money and all your name, the power of both those things behind one candidate, or you could have run yourself. And he did neither one of those. All he did was kind of muddy the process and point out the fact that the establishment is so strongly against Donald Trump, they don't care what happens as long as it's not Trump. And that's a good place for Trump to be in a time when anti-establishment momentum is something that people love.
Well, and I think the reason there's concern is not just because of there's so many different reasons they have concern, but if you look at the exit polls in Ohio, for example, they say, who's your second choice, your third choice? Would you pick, a Donald Trump? You get, in some cases, 2/3 that would not. You get this growing amount of Republicans who don't necessarily feel comfortable with Mr. Trump. So there has to be some work on the Trump campaign to close that gap. That's a significant issue. If you became the nominee, they wouldn't support it.
And part of that,
or they'd be open to a third party.
And part of that, real quickly, is because it's been so brutal on our side. We've had so much divisiveness going on. We started off with 17 candidates. Now we're down to just a few. And the Democrats haven't had that. So it's much easier to say, if I don't support Bernie, I could go with Hillary, because there hadn't been but two really from the get-go that had any substantial chance at all.
Right. And Hogan, to that point about where we are right now in terms of the number of candidates, we just in the CBS News right now, we can confirm that the debate in Salt Lake City, the GOP debate that was to be held on Monday, I think, is now being canceled. I think it started when Donald Trump said he wasn't going to participate, and then John Kasich said he wasn't going to participate, and I guess Ted Cruz is the last man standing. I'm sure he would have loved to have a debate with himself, but he decided.
Well, it's like at this point, how much more?
He's not going to say no.
But that's how much more are they going to say? I mean, I felt like we've discussed this, in the issues and that sort of thing.
But that's how he won the Senate. He had all these town halls with an empty chair.
John Boehner told Politico that if there is a contested convention, he would support Paul Ryan as the party's nominee. Now, what do you make of that?
I covered John Boehner, and I guess my first question would be, in what context was this? Because John Boehner can kind of just make off-the-cuff comments, and as you know, John Boehner is a big fan of Paul Ryan. He practically pushed him into taking the speaker's job after he stepped down. And so my first question is, I don't know how serious that is. That's just kind of like a theoretical, off-the-cuff thing that he said. And again, it just brings us back full circle to the discussion that we've been having about the uproar that would take place if you tried to install anyone into that position who hadn't been out there campaigning, working for it, and particularly if you had a plurality of or more, which is pretty safe assumption at this point, supporting Donald Trump. I don't think it's realistic, and frankly, I think Paul Ryan has kind of been pushed far enough on this into the speakership, and I don't think he wants to go that far at this point.
I was going to say, is he even saying that he would consider that?
I haven't heard him say that yet. But I mean, look, if this had been any other candidate than Donald Trump, they'd all be saying, okay, if it had been Jeb Bush, okay, we have our nominee. Let's everybody coalesce. It's time to get going here. It's a complete opposite here because it's Donald Trump. If almost anybody else, they'd have rallied behind him by this point.
I think they look into the data too, and it's so funny. People get so excited about Governor Kasich. It's like one state.
Right.
Yay.
Well, because he's excited.
Late bloomer.
Yeah.
So genuine, though.
That news.
It is. He is very genuine, Heidi. He delivered a interesting, very heartfelt speech yesterday. Although I did see some rumblings in the press about former staffers of his who worked for him in Congress who say that, just like a lot of politicians, what you see sometimes is not always what you get.
Everyone I've talked to says that about him, and we talked about before. He tried to be aggressive around the second or third debate, and people forget that. They say, oh, he's always been the nice guy. He tried to be aggressive early on with Trump. It didn't play well in the debate, and then he was kind of quiet the rest of the debate. So he is the nice guy in this campaign. That's what he's trying to play at. But it's because he has no other lane to be in, right? He can't be the establishment candidate, really, because Rubio was in it to this point. He couldn't be farther to the right than Ted Cruz. He couldn't be a successful businessman like Donald Trump. He had to find something different. So his only lane
and Rubio
was
tried to play
Mr.
that
Nice
game,
Guy.
and it didn't work.
Didn't work,
I think
exactly.
what you're speaking to, though, is his temperament, too. And I think that's a good point, because I remember many months ago when John Kasich was first getting into the race, a number of us were discussing that he could, when pushed too far by the press, become irritated and angry. And I think now that he's in a much higher profile, arguably, and he's going to be getting a lot more incoming, we'll see.